Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am so glad that you are here. And today we're talking all things macronutrients, macros, whatever you want to call them. We're going to dive into that. And this video is all about the 10 common mistakes that I see people making when it comes to tracking their macronutrients. I do have a ton of other videos around macros for weight loss and how to calculate your numbers and all of that fun stuff. So what I'll do is I'll put the description for those put the link for those in the description below for you. And I want to preface this by saying there will be a little bit of a focus here on like weight loss and sort of a little bit more of these really dialed in macronutrient numbers and how that can be helpful. But I do want to say that there is nothing more that I can stress than just trying here as far as macronutrients go. It doesn't have to be perfect. We go for progress over perfection always. And so while I'm talking, I just don't want anybody to get into the trap of like, oh my gosh, I have to go out and do all these things and I have to change everything. Because while these are the 10 common mistakes I see around tracking macronutrients, I'm just coming on here to share them with you so that you can make different choices, make these choices from a bit more of an empowered and educated place. But by no means am I hoping from this video that you go out and completely overhaul the way that you're doing things, because what you're doing is enough. And if you're watching this video, that means that there's some interest for macronutrients or some interest around, maybe doing something a little bit differently because you've been on these horrible restrictive diets in the past. And all I can say is that welcome home. And I apologize in advance because I have a little bit of surf brain going on. This video was meant to be shot in the morning before we went. And now, because we're just such pro surfers, what happened is we checked the report. Someone messaged us and said, oh, like the swell's good, because apparently that's how we talk now. And then we had to go. Like, it's just that time where the tide lines up, the waves are good. And so we just went. And my promise to myself was that I was going to shoot this video today. And so I have surf brain, which is a very real thing. There's a surfboard in the background, and sometimes it legit feels like you're still in the water even when you're on land. It's like, I think it has a name for it, like sea legs or something like that. But normally that's from a boat, not surfing. Anyway, let's get to it. The 10 most common mistakes that I see around tracking macronutrients. Number 1 is the eyeballing everything. And this is why I wanted to do that sort of preface in the beginning, because the goal is to never track macronutrients for the rest of our lives. That, in my opinion, is a miserable life. If we're inside MyFitnessPal and we're entering absolutely everything down to the gram that we are consuming for the rest of our life, that's not what the goal of this is. My goal when I'm talking to people about macronutrients is we want to learn about food, we want to educate ourselves about food so that we can get away from these tracking apps, because then we just know the information, versus when we follow a meal plan, for example, which is a lot of what, nutritionists and dietitians, they give you this meal plan to follow. You're not learning anything about food or how it responds in your body or the nutritional quantities or quality of these foods that you're consuming. And so it doesn't set you up for success. But when we talk about the common mistake that I see as eyeballing everything in the beginning, that's where it can get a little tricky, because when you are learning, it does require a little bit more of that sort of preciseness around the food. If you're eyeballing and just throwing things in and not measuring anything, then it's very easy for the macronutrients you're following to be way off by the end of the day. And so I by no means want people to be grabbing the scale and weighing absolutely everything that you are consuming, but a little bit more of just like being really intentional with what you are consuming and getting as close as possible, versus just eyeballing and just like throwing things together, scooping things out, because all of a sudden you're going to get frustrated with macronutrients. You're going to think it doesn't work for you, when it could just be as something as simple as, instead of eyeballing, especially at the beginning, let's focus a little bit more on getting close, getting precise with these measurements so that we can actually see results, feel empowered by food, and you're like, okay, I can come away from measuring everything because I know. Then you can use the eyeball method, because then you know what amounts should and can look like when you're consuming them. The second biggest mistake that I see around tracking macronutrients, and I'm going to coin this term as like the 1 tablespoon of peanut butter obsession. That's a really long term to call it, so maybe we need some work there. But I'm speaking from experience here. We can get really addicted to being so precise with these measurements that we feel constrained by them and that we feel like we don't know how to get away from them. And so when we think about something like peanut butter, this is a great example, because if you're like me, and I'd love to hear it in the comments below if you can relate to this, you have been a peanut butter measurer. And it's not a fun place to live. Peanut butter is delicious. I love peanut butter, but what I don't love is being restricted to just having 1 tablespoon of it a day. And so yes, fat does add up in terms of calories. Like, it is it's the highest in the macronutrient world, as far as 1 gram of fat equals 9 calories. And so we do need to be careful if tracking macronutrients for weight loss is a priority to you, because it can quickly add up. But what we don't want to do is turn into these people who obsess over that 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, and we think that the world is over if we are having 1.5 or 2 or 3. And what I want to stress is that it's just not a fun life to live. And so please, while you're getting started tracking macronutrients, or while you're learning about these things, if you're noticing yourself like measuring 1 tablespoon and then scraping the top off so it's like level and flat, let's have some red flags go up. Let's have some alarm bells, because likely for the goals that you're striving for, we don't need to be that exact to the point where it's causing a miserable life and that you don't know what to do if you've had accidentally a little bit more peanut butter, someone made something for you and it's got more than that 1 tablespoon on. That's definitely not a fun life to live. Okay, the third biggest mistake that I see when it comes to tracking macronutrients, this is a little bit more complex, so stay with me. It's eating back the calories that you've burnt. And so a lot of people will be using a tool like MyFitnessPal, and what that does is that you enter in your food for the day and it calculates that in a macronutrient number. So it will tell you how many carbs you ate, how many protein grams you ate, and how many fat grams you ate for the day. Those 3 things actually equal calories. And so when we think about that, let's just say, for example, it's an 1800 calorie day. That's how much you're, aiming to consume. And then that's broken down into these macronutrients. When we think about 1800 calories a day, I know, stay with me, there is something called TDEE. So it's our total daily energy expenditure. If we're focusing on weight loss, we do need to be consuming under that amount. And so what happens, what I see all the time, is that someone is, they've got these macro numbers and then they know it equals 1800 calories, and then they enter in everything in the day, but then their food, their workout, their exercise, whatever they've done, it's also being tracked. And then that brings down that 1800 number. So if I do a workout that, my watch tells me I burnt 300 calories, and now my math is going to get tested here, but if I enter that in, that brings it down to 1500. If I eat back those calories to make it 1800, I'm consuming 300 extra than I actually need to be to achieve my weight loss goals. And so when we're talking about macronutrients, and I'll kind of wrap it all up here and summarize with this point, essentially don't track the exercise and have it sort of take off that main number. If you are working with someone who has given you these macronutrients, it should be in conjunction with the exercise and what you're doing in your day, how many calories you're burning a day. That's the best way to do it. And so enter the exercise somewhere else, track that somewhere else, but don't let it chip away at those calories that you're consuming per day with your macronutrient numbers. Okay, number 4. This is the biggest mistake that I see so easily happening, and there's nothing wrong with you if this has happened to you in the past, because again, if you don't know, you don't know. And so it's not double checking the entry. And what I mean by that is that MyFitnessPal is generated, like anyone can enter things into that. It's kind of like the Wikipedia world. And so if I'm entering in a food that I want someone to be able to log into MyFitnessPal, I could essentially make any nutritional information up for that. The reason MyFitnessPal is so great is because it has such a robust database in there, and a lot of the time it is very, very accurate with the nutritional content of the food that's actually in that database. But it's not to say that that's all the time. And so a good way to do this is just having a quick double check of the nutritional content. So if you scan something, if you use the barcode and you're scanning something to enter it in, just looking at the nutritional content on whatever you're eating and making sure it lines up. And again, not down to the gram, but at least in the general wheelhouse of what you're actually consuming. Because if it's off, and then by the end of the day, you've got 20 entries and each one is a little bit off, all of a sudden, you might not be getting enough food, you might be getting too much food that can align with your goals. And so we just want to double check that entry to make sure that things are actually accurate to what we're consuming day to day. Okay, 5th tip coming in hot, and it's all about those cooking fats and oils. This one I wouldn't stress as much. Like, please don't go and change everything in regards to what you're doing when it comes to cooking. But what I see time and time again from people who are frustrated that they aren't losing weight, and they're frustrated that they're not meeting their goals, or it's not happening and they don't understand, they're hitting their macros. And then all of a sudden we take a bit of a look at the, a quarter cup of butter or oil or something that's going on in the cooking process. And again, I don't want you to make huge changes here and make food miserable for yourself because you no longer use those things. All I'm saying here is paying a little bit of attention to the fats and the oils that we're using in that cooking process, because as I mentioned before, fat is our highest calorie macronutrient, and so it adds up really quickly. And when you're tracking your macronutrients, I know how frustrating it can be when you're like, I'm following these numbers, I'm doing everything right. Why are these results not happening? And sometimes just paying a little bit more close attention to those fats, to those oils in that cooking process, slight changes there can make a world of difference. Okay, we are rocking and rolling. Stay with me. If you've gone and opened something else on your phone, or you've put me down and I'm just sitting on your lap and you're not even paying attention to this video anymore because you're like, what is she talking about? I don't even know what macronutrients are, and now she's giving me how I'm already doing it wrong. Stay with me, because I promise you, this is knowledge, this is helpful, and I can't wait for you to actually be like, oh wow, I made one small change or one small tweak out of the long list of 10 macronutrient mistakes that I'm providing here, and then all of a sudden results happen, change happens. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Okay, it's not about taking all of these tips, but come back to me, we're nearly done. So the next tip I have for you is all around sauces and condiments. Now, there is this whole world of people, myself included, and I've come a long way in terms of progress here, but it's the hold the dressing or put the dressing on the side. We don't need to be doing that. But what I mean around the sauces and the condiments, it's similar to the other tip around the cooking fats. This can be something that if we just pay a little bit more close attention to, can make a big difference. Again, a lot of people come to me and they're like, I'm tracking my macronutrients, I'm hitting these numbers, I'm definitely in a calorie deficit. Why am I not reaching my weight loss goals? Why is change not happening? And then we're looking at, okay, you're eating salads because maybe someone has told you that salads are healthy and salads are the way to go, but throughout the day, look how much dressing we're putting on those. Look how many things we're dipping these, chicken tenders into. This all adds up, and often it adds up to multiple hundreds of calories extra per day. And so again, we don't want to hold the dressing. We don't want to put it on the side. We don't want to be choking down boring, bland food, but being a little bit more mindful about what we're putting on, and then even the difference in nutritional quality of what we are putting on our food, that in itself can make a huge difference in when it comes to macronutrients and your tracking. Okay, tip number 7. This is a fun one because there are many people that struggle with this. And so I think this is going to be really helpful. It's all around entering these foods. So for example, takeout, or something that we get at a restaurant, or something that we're not sure, or we think, that in our head, this is not going to fly. This is not going to hit my goals. This is not going to help me hit my goals. This is not going to help me in my fitness power when I enter this. And so I'm going to give you, a real case study scenario. A client of mine was having this resistance. She was noticing all of this resistance around every Friday night. Her and her family get takeout. She's had these delicious Indian dishes. And when you punch in something like butter chicken, lots of options come up. And so there's this resistance of well, I'm not gonna, this one, seems pretty good. This one's, 350 calories, and then you add some rice, and this one looks okay nutritionally. But this one over here, this one's telling me that it's 1,500 calories for 1 cup. And so it's oh my goodness, I don't know which one it is. I don't know which one to put in. So I'm just not going to enter in anything. What this can do is then it makes us view these foods or these meals in such a negative way that we don't even want to have them, because it creates this guilt cycle when it comes to entering things in, and it can just be a nightmare. It can be a disaster. And so here is what I recommend. Number one, we either just do not enter it. We put all of our attention and our focus on everything else we've been doing throughout the week, because likely if you're tracking macronutrients, you're eating a ton of veggies, you're eating lots of fruit, you're eating plenty of complex carbohydrates, and you're trying to bump up that protein goal as best you can. So when it comes to something like takeout or butter chicken, for example, it's like, just eat the butter chicken. Just have the butter chicken. Don't worry about entering it. Don't worry about tracking it. And tell yourself, I'm okay. I am safe. This is not going to impact my goals. This is not going to halt my progress. And then we move on with our life. It sounds so simple. I know it's really much more difficult to do. So here's my number 2 tip around that. And you can choose one of these 2 options, whichever one fits best for you. The number 1 is just don't even enter it. Don't worry about it. Focus on what you are doing and what makes you really happy when it comes to tracking your macronutrients. The second thing is pick the highest one. So for example, if it's butter chicken and you've got this one that's like says it's 1500 calories for the 1 cup serving, choose that one. Let it go in, because in your mind, you're then like, okay, I likely know that the one that I ate wasn't actually the high one. It wasn't actually this one that's showing as the highest, calorie count in my fitness pal. So already you're being a little bit more kind to yourself. And then what you're going to see is it's actually at the end of the day, probably not as bad as you were expecting when all of your numbers are done. So those are my 2 tips around that. But we definitely don't want to just live in this place where we start to resent those foods or we start to avoid them because we're not sure what to do when it comes to MyFitnessPal. Number 8, this is the biggest mistake that I see, but my favorite tip to give out. And so tip number 8 is screw perfection. It is not about being perfect. If you're 20 grams over what you were supposed to be consuming when it comes to your carbs intake per day, who cares? Is anybody walking around? It's kind of how I feel about the scale. Like when we think about our weight and when we think about jumping on that scale and weighing ourselves, I know a lot of you are like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen that video of you absolutely swearing your head off around people jumping on the scale. Yes, this is kind of how I feel. It's the exact same. It's perfection when it comes to macros. That's not the goal. We don't need to be perfect. If we have some sort of race or competition or something that we're training for that requires that level of perfection to be down to the gram when it comes to our macronutrients because it's going to equal performance, okay, fine, different story. But you're likely already working with someone, you're likely already training for that, and this video then is likely not super helpful for you. I'm talking to the rest of us here when we're like, oh gosh, I'm so bad at tracking macronutrients because I just keep going over my carbs and my fats and I can't get anywhere near my protein goal. That's okay. We need to get away from the perfectionism piece that's screaming loudly in our head and just be proud of ourselves that we're like, I'm trying something new. I am not counting my calories anymore. I'm tracking my macros because I'm actually learning about food. I'm figuring out how it responds in my body. I am fueling myself versus starving myself. And these are all the huge, big benefits of tracking your macronutrients, in my opinion. And so let's screw the perfectionism. Let's crunch it up into a ball, throw it out the window. It can light on fire as it's going down. And we say goodbye to being perfect, because I assure you, for the results that you're trying to achieve, perfection is not required. Okay, I got 2 more tips. 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 So I think I said that the last tip was number 8. I don't know how I messed that up, but I think, no, this one's number 8. I don't even know what's going on. Tip number 9. I hate this word, but I'm going to throw it out as a tip because I see this mistake happening over and over and over again. But let's not fixate too heavily on this word, okay? But my number 1 tip to avoid a common mistake that I see around macronutrients is patience. Ew, right? It's a yucky word. We don't want to be patient. We want things now. But what I mean by this is that if you have a set of macronutrients, so if you've got your carbs, you've got your protein, you've got your fat for your day, you know what you're eating, you're rocking and rolling, we need to give our body time to adjust. And so if we think after 2 weeks, this is not working, what am I doing wrong? And we switch macronutrients, then we're just delaying this whole process of our body actually working with us, working for us, because it's not enough time, unfortunately, for things to level out, for your body to even realize what's happening. And so patience is key, and I don't mean years. We should, in my opinion, not be tracking macronutrients for years and waiting for results to happen. I am talking a month is usually what I say as a general rule of thumb. So 4 weeks of using the same macronutrients to see how our body's responding. If something is not feeling good, if something is not working the way that we want, that's when we can make some adjustments. And then, you know what, we have to sort of wait another 4 weeks to see if that adjustment is working or not. And so, in my opinion, this is where having a really good coach around macronutrients can be helpful versus someone who's just guessing, taking a stab, giving you the macronutrients they follow, all of these other variables, because every single person has a different set of macronutrients that is for them and that aligns with them and their goals. And so we need to be patient, but we don't need to be patient for years and years to see results, whatever these results are, when we are tracking macronutrients. All right, I touched on it a little bit, but another common mistake, and this is our last one, it is people going it alone. Not having a coach, not having a support system. This is what I do. So obviously I'm a huge advocate for it, but the reason that I am is because it can be really lonely. It can be really confusing. And a lot of the time, if you're trying to track macronutrients, you don't have a huge education around nutrition, and likely you're coming from a background where you've tried diet after diet, you've tried meal plan after meal plan, you've tried program after program. And so you're coming in with all of these sort of preconceived ideas or these negative thoughts around food or just whatever's been going on in your mind. And again, there's nothing wrong with you. This is just the way that this sort of diet culture works. And so when it comes to macronutrients, how helpful can it be that someone is an expert in this space? And that's why I recommend not necessarily going it alone. And if a coach isn't something that you want to invest in, if a coach isn't something that you're ready for, at least a support group or circle of some sort. So maybe it's a few friends that want to do this with you. Maybe you join a free Facebook group of women who are tracking their macronutrients and they're just getting started. The world is your oyster when it comes to resources here. But one of the biggest common mistakes that I see is people going it alone, trying different macronutrients every week, and then just feeling frustrated and thinking that that's just one thing that is out there again in that sort of fitness and wellness world that doesn't work for them, because it could not be further from the truth. Maybe just getting some support around you of whatever capacity that looks like so that you can actually be empowered around macronutrients instead of frustrated, because that's the goal. That is like ultimately, in my opinion, where we need to go with this. We need to feel good around food. We need to love food. And one of the best parts about macronutrients is that it allows us to eat those fun things. So these cookies, these cakes, these donuts, this buttered chicken, macronutrients is not going to tell you instantly that you're like over your calories for the day, because it's actually focusing on something different, focusing way more on this nutritional quality of the food, and that can be a much happier place to live. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, I'm going to ask a huge favor before you go, before you hit that X at the top. Go ahead, like this video. It helps get this message out to more people that need it and that are searching for it. Imagine someone's frustrated. They're like, it's not working for me. And then they type in, what am I doing wrong with my macronutrients? And then this video comes up. That's my hope. That's my goal. So please give it a like. And then it would be just like a cherry on top if you could subscribe to my channel. That would mean the world to me. I'm so excited that you're here, and I just want these videos to reach more amazing people like you. And so if you subscribe to my channel, it'll make sure that you don't miss any of the other fun stuff coming your way. So thank you for watching. You're the best. Let's go track our macronutrients and have fun while we do it. Bye.